Chapter 1. Robert couldn't believe that summer camp had finally arrived. He had been looking forward to this day for months, counting down the days on his calendar, dreaming of the adventures he would have and the friends he would make. Now, as he stood in his bedroom surrounded by his bags, he felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. What if he didn't make any friends? What if he got lost in the woods? What if something terrible happened? But Robert pushed those thoughts aside and focused on the task at hand. He had to make sure he had everything he needed for camp. He checked and double-checked his list, making sure he had his sleeping bag, his flashlight, his water bottle, and his Lucky Rock. He packed his favorite books and comics, his frisbee, and his baseball glove. He even packed a small photo of his family and his dog, Sparky, to remind him of home. As he zipped up his last bag, Robert heard the sound of his parents and sister downstairs. He took a deep breath and walked down the stairs, his bags clunking behind him. His parents smiled at him and gave him big hugs, telling him how proud they were of him for going to camp. "Be safe, Robert," his mother said, her eyes misty, "and have fun." "I will, Mom," Robert said, trying to sound confident. "I'll write you every day." His little sister hugged him tightly, her arms barely reaching around his waist. "I'll miss you, big brother," she said, her voice muffled in his shirt. "I'll miss you too, kiddo," Robert said, ruffling her hair. And then it was time for Sparky. Robert's loyal dog looked up at him with big brown eyes, his tail wagging hesitantly. Robert knelt down and hugged him, feeling the soft fur against his face. "Goodbye, Sparky," he whispered. "I'll miss you, boy. You take care of Mom and Dad and Lily, okay?" Sparky whimpered, as if he knew something Robert didn't. Robert patted him on the head and stood up, his heart heavy. "It's time to go, Robert," his father said, putting a hand on his shoulder. Robert nodded, his eyes misty. He took a deep breath and picked up his bags, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He walked out of the door and down the driveway, his family waving goodbye from the porch. As he walked to the bus station, Robert felt a strange sensation in the pit of his stomach. Was it homesickness? Fear? He couldn't quite put his finger on it. He looked back at his house and saw Sparky standing at the window, watching him go. Robert waved at him, and Sparky barked once, as if saying goodbye. Robert shook his head and focused on the road ahead. He was going to Camp Full Moon, and nothing was going to stop him from having the time of his life. Chapter 2. Robert boarded the bus, feeling a sense of excitement mixed with trepidation. He looked around and saw a sea of unfamiliar faces. Most of the kids seemed to know each other, chatting and laughing as they found their seats. Robert found an empty seat by the window and sat down, feeling a bit lonely and out of place. As the bus pulled out of the station, Robert looked out the window, watching as the buildings and houses of the town slowly gave way to forests and fields. The scenery was beautiful, but Robert couldn't help feeling a little homesick. He wondered if his family and dog were doing okay without him. Suddenly, a voice interrupted his thoughts. "Hey there, mind if I sit here?" Robert turned and saw a boy with a friendly face and curly brown hair. Sure," he said, scooting over to make room. "I'm Hunter," the boy said, extending his hand. "I'm Robert," Robert replied, shaking his hand. "Nice to meet you, Robert," Hunter said. "You're going to Camp Full Moon, right?" Robert nodded. "Yeah, are you?" "Yep, same here," Hunter said. "I've been going for the past 3 summers. It's the best camp ever." "Really? What's so great about it?" Robert asked, curious. "Well, for starters, they have awesome activities like archery, rock climbing, and canoeing," Hunter said. "And the counselors are really cool. They make you feel like you're part of a big family." "That sounds amazing," Robert said, feeling a spark of excitement. "It is. And you know what the best part is?" Hunter said, leaning in conspiratorially. "There's a legend about a ghost who haunts the woods at night. Some people say they've seen her, but nobody knows for sure if she's real." "A ghost?" Robert said, feeling a shiver run down his spine. "Yeah, isn't it awesome?" Hunter said, grinning. "I bet we'll be the ones to find her." Robert smiled, feeling a sense of camaraderie with Hunter. Maybe this camp wouldn't be so bad after all. Suddenly, a girl's voice broke in. "Hi, can we sit here too?" Robert turned and saw a girl with wild curly hair and a mischievous grin. She was accompanied by another girl, who had straight black hair and a more serious expression. Sure, Robert said, feeling a little overwhelmed. I'm Luna, the curly-haired girl said, plopping down next to Hunter. And this is my cousin, Mia. Nice to meet you guys, Hunter said, grinning. So, are you guys excited for camp? Luna asked. Yeah, definitely, Robert said. Hunter here was just telling me about the ghost in the woods. Oh yeah, I've heard about her, Luna said, her eyes sparkling. I bet we could catch her if we tried. Mia rolled her eyes. You guys and your ghost stories. You know they're not real, right? Don't be such a buzzkill, Mia, Luna said, sticking out her tongue. The four of them chatted and laughed, getting to know each other better. Robert felt a sense of belonging that he hadn't felt since he left home. As the bus continued down the winding road, Robert looked out the window and marveled at the scenery. The trees were tall and majestic, their leaves rustling in the breeze. Birds flitted back and forth, their songs filling the air. Robert felt a sense of wonder and awe, as if he was seeing the world for the first time. Chapter 3. The bus pulled into a gas station for a quick pit stop, and the kids eagerly filed off the bus. Robert stretched his legs, feeling a bit stiff from the long ride. He looked around, taking in his surroundings. The gas station was small, with only a few pumps and a convenience store attached to it. It was surrounded by trees, and the air was thick with the scent of pine. Feeling the need to use the restroom, Robert headed towards the door marked Men. As he walked in, he felt a chill run down his spine. The restroom was small and dimly lit, with a flickering fluorescent light casting eerie shadows on the walls. Robert hesitated for a moment, wondering if he should wait until they reached the camp, but the urgency of the situation won out. As he entered the stall, he heard a faint scratching sound coming from somewhere behind him. Robert froze, feeling a sense of unease wash over him. He tried to shrug it off, thinking it was just his imagination, but the sound grew louder, more insistent. It was as if something was trying to claw its way through the wall. Suddenly, Robert heard a low growling sound, and he whipped around, heart racing. There was nothing there but the empty stall next to him. He peered over the divider, but it was dark, and he couldn't see anything. Trying to calm his racing heart, Robert quickly finished up and washed his hands. As he headed back towards the door, he heard the scratching sound again, louder this time, and accompanied by a low moaning sound. Robert couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him, something malevolent. He shook his head, trying to convince himself that it was just his imagination running wild. As he exited the restroom, he took a deep breath and walked towards the convenience store. The bright fluorescent lights and cheerful chatter of his fellow campers helped to ease his unease, and he quickly forgot about the strange noises in the restroom. The kids had wasted no time raiding the snack aisle, and the shelves were nearly empty. Robert grabbed a bag of beef jerky and some trail mix, feeling his stomach grumble. He joined the others in line at the register, and they chatted excitedly about what the camp had in store for them. As they boarded the bus, Robert couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement mixed with apprehension. He glanced out the window, watching as the gas station disappeared from view, and the road ahead stretched out before them, twisting and turning through the forest. The bus ride was filled with laughter and chatter as the kids exchanged stories and made plans for the coming weeks. The scenery outside the window was breathtaking, with towering trees and sparkling streams rushing past. Robert felt a sense of wonder and excitement at the prospect of spending the summer in such a beautiful place. As they neared the camp, the excitement in the bus grew palpable. The kids leaned forward in their seats, craning their necks to catch a glimpse of their new home. Suddenly, the bus rounded a bend, and the camp came into view. It was nestled in a clearing, surrounded by tall trees and the sound of a babbling brook. The cabins were rustic, made of logs and set far apart from each other. There was a large lake in the center of the clearing, and a rope bridge spanned it, leading to an island in the middle. The bus pulled up to a stop, and the kids eagerly disembarked. They were greeted by a group of friendly counselors who welcomed them and directed them towards their cabins. Robert looked around, feeling a sense of excitement and belonging. This was going to be the best summer ever. Chapter 4. As the bus rolled to a stop in front of a large wooden sign that read, Camp Full Moon, the kids all eagerly peered out the windows. The excitement was palpable as they filed out of the bus and onto the gravel path leading into the camp. They were greeted by a group of counselors, all wearing matching blue t-shirts and big smiles. One of them, a tall woman with a friendly face, stepped forward and introduced herself as Karen. "Welcome to Camp Full Moon," Karen said cheerfully. "We're so glad you're all here. We're going to have an amazing summer together." Karen gave them a brief rundown of the camp rules and schedule, then divided them into groups for a tour. Robert found himself in a group with Luna, Mia, and Hunter, as well as a few other kids they had met on the bus. Their tour guide was a young man named Jake, who was sporting a backwards baseball cap and a perpetual grin. "All right, guys, let's get started," Jake said, leading them down a winding path through the woods. "First up, we have the dining hall. This is where we'll have all of our meals, and trust me, the food is amazing." As they entered the dining hall, Robert couldn't help but feel impressed. The room was massive, with long wooden tables stretching the length of the room. The walls were decorated with colorful murals of woodland creatures and nature scenes. Next, they were taken to the cabins. Each cabin housed around 8 campers and had its own bathroom and shower. Robert was relieved to see that his cabin was clean and cozy, with sturdy wooden bunk beds and colorful quilts. After the cabins, they visited the Arts and Crafts building, where they were shown various projects they could work on throughout the summer. Robert was excited to try his hand at pottery and woodworking. The last stop on their tour was the waterfront. Jake explained that they would be spending a lot of time here, swimming, boating, and fishing. Robert couldn't wait to jump into the cool, refreshing lake. As they made their way back to the main area of the camp, Robert felt a sense of excitement and anticipation. He couldn't wait to get started on all the activities and make new friends. Just then, he heard a familiar voice calling his name. It was Karen, the counselor who had greeted them when they arrived. "Robert, can you come with me for a moment?" she asked. Robert felt a twinge of nervousness as he followed her over to a small wooden building on the edge of the camp. Karen led him inside and motioned for him to take a seat on a cushioned bench. "Robert, I wanted to talk to you about something," Karen said, her tone serious. "We noticed on your registration form that you have a severe nut allergy. Is that correct?" Robert nodded, feeling a knot form in his stomach. "We take allergies very seriously here at Camp Full Moon," Karen said. "We want to make sure you stay safe and healthy during your time here. That's why we need to take some extra precautions." Karen went on to explain that they would be implementing a nut-free policy in the dining hall and making sure that all activities and snacks were free from nuts. Robert felt a sense of relief wash over him. He had been worried about his allergy and how it would affect his time at camp. "Thank you so much, Karen," Robert said gratefully. "I really appreciate it." "No problem, Robert," Karen said with a smile. "We're here to make sure you have the best summer ever." Feeling reassured, Robert rejoined his group as they headed back to the main area. Chapter 5. Robert and the group were ushered into the mess hall, a large wooden building with a high-pitched roof and a long table that ran down the center. The counselors encouraged everyone to take a seat, and Robert found himself sitting next to Luna and Hunter, with Mia across from him. The campers looked up expectantly as one of the counselors, a tall, thin woman with curly brown hair, stood up and addressed the group. "Welcome to Camp Full Moon, everyone. My name is Rachel, and I'm one of the senior counselors here. We're so excited to have all of you here with us this summer, and we can't wait to show you all the amazing things we have in store." There was a smattering of applause and cheers from the campers, and Rachel smiled. "Now, before we get started, I want to talk to you all about some of our camp traditions. We take our traditions very seriously here at Camp Full Moon, and we hope that you'll come to love them just as much as we do." She cleared her throat and continued. "First up, we have Frisbee. Frisbee is a big deal at Camp Full Moon. We play it every day, rain or shine, and it's a great way to get some exercise, make new friends, and just have fun. So, if you're not already a Frisbee fan, you soon will be." Robert looked around, feeling a little bewildered. He had played Frisbee before, but he had never seen people take it so seriously. He made a mental note to brush up on his Frisbee skills. Rachel went on to talk about other traditions, such as the all-meat meals that they had every day, which sounded a little intimidating to Robert, who was more of a veggie person, and the weekly campfire sing-alongs. As Rachel finished up her speech and the campers began to file out of the mess hall, Robert felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. He was excited to try out some new things and meet new people, but he was also a little nervous about fitting in and living up to the camp's expectations. As they made their way outside, Robert heard the sound of frisbees whizzing through the air and saw groups of campers tossing them back and forth. He felt a pang of anxiety. He wasn't sure he was ready to jump right into the frisbee frenzy just yet. But as they walked further into the camp, Robert began to feel a sense of belonging. He saw kids of all ages and backgrounds, all laughing and playing together. He heard snippets of conversation and laughter, and he realized that he was already starting to make friends. As they rounded a corner, Robert saw a group of kids gathered around a fire pit, roasting marshmallows and singing campfire songs. He felt a sense of warmth and nostalgia wash over him, even though he had never been to camp before. The group continued their tour, visiting the archery range, the lake for canoeing and kayaking, and the rock climbing wall. Robert was impressed by the variety of activities and the quality of the equipment. As they made their way back to their cabins, Robert felt a sense of exhaustion and exhilaration. He was tired from the long day of travel and the excitement of exploring the camp, but he was also energized by the possibilities of the weeks ahead. As he lay in his bunk, listening to the sounds of the other campers settling in for the night, Robert felt a sense of contentment. He had made some new friends, tried out some new activities, and even gotten a taste of the camp's strange traditions. He closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep. Chapter 6. Robert couldn't stop thinking about the scary story he had heard around the campfire that night. It was about vampires and werewolves fighting in the woods, and even though he knew it wasn't real, it still gave him goosebumps. He decided to take a walk to clear his head. As he walked deeper into the woods, the trees grew thicker, and the sounds of the camp grew fainter. Robert started to feel uneasy and wished he had brought a flashlight. He heard a twig snap behind him, and he spun around, heart racing. But there was nothing there. Robert's mind was playing tricks on him. He knew that, but he couldn't help feeling spooked. He continued walking, trying to focus on his breathing and the sound of his footsteps. But the woods seemed to be closing in on him, and the darkness was starting to feel oppressive. Suddenly, Robert heard a low growl, and he froze. He turned around and saw a pair of glowing eyes staring back at him. He couldn't tell what kind of animal it was, but it was big and had sharp teeth. Robert slowly backed away, trying not to make any sudden movements. But then, he heard another growl, this time closer. He turned around and saw another pair of glowing eyes, and then another. Robert was surrounded, and he knew he was in trouble. He tried to run, but his feet tangled in the underbrush, and he tripped and fell. The animals closed in on him, snarling and baring their teeth. Robert closed his eyes, waiting for the worst. But then, there was a loud shout, and the animals scattered. Robert looked up and saw a group of campers, led by Hunter and Luna, running towards him with sticks and flashlights. They had heard his screams and had come to help. "Are you okay?" Hunter asked, helping Robert to his feet. "Yeah, I think so," Robert said, shaking with adrenaline. "What happened?" Luna asked, shining her flashlight into the woods. "I don't know," Robert said. "I heard some growling, and then these animals surrounded me." "Animals?" Mia asked, frowning. "What kind of animals?" "I don't know," Robert said, feeling embarrassed. "I didn't see them very clearly." "Well, let's get out of here before they come back," Hunter said, leading the way. The group walked back to camp, with Robert feeling a sense of gratitude towards his new friends. He couldn't believe how lucky he was to have met them. They seemed to have his back, no matter what. As they entered the camp, they saw that the bonfire was still going, and some of the campers were dancing around it. Robert felt a pang of jealousy. He had wanted to be a part of that, to have fun and make memories like they were doing. But then, Luna grabbed his arm and dragged him towards the fire. "Come on, let's dance," she yelled over the music. Robert felt self-conscious, but he couldn't resist Luna's enthusiasm. He started dancing, and soon, the others joined in. They were all laughing and having a good time, and Robert felt a sense of belonging that he had never felt before. After a while, the group sat down by the fire, catching their breath. "That was amazing," Robert said, grinning from ear to ear. "I told you this camp was the best," Hunter said, nudging him. "Yeah, you were right," Robert said, feeling grateful. "I can't believe I almost missed out on this." "Hey, don't worry about it," Luna said, patting his head. Chapter 7. As the beat of the drums faded away, the group settled back down around the fire, their eyes now drawn to the flickering flames. Robert shivered slightly as the cool night air crept in around them. Luna, noticing his discomfort, offered him a warm blanket from her bag. He gratefully accepted, wrapping it around his shoulders. "All right," Hunter said, clapping his hands together. "Who's ready for some ghost stories?" The group murmured in agreement, their eyes widening with anticipation. Hunter leaned forward, his eyes glinting mischievously in the firelight. Hunter, the tallest and oldest of the group, cleared his throat and began his story. There was once a powerful pack of werewolves living in these woods. They were ruled by a wise and just alpha named Greyback. He had many powerful warriors by his side, including his second-in-command, a fierce and loyal beta named Razorclaw. The kids leaned in closer, their eyes wide with anticipation. Hunter continued, "But one day, a powerful vampire clan moved into the area. Led by their ruthless queen, Lady Crimson, they began attacking the werewolf pack, seeking to dominate and control them." The campfire crackled and popped as Hunter's voice grew louder and more intense. The werewolves fought back with all their might, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. It seemed like they were doomed to lose the battle. But then, Hunter paused for dramatic effect. Something amazing happened. Greyback discovered that he had a secret weapon, a rare, enchanted crystal that could give him and his warriors incredible strength and speed, even in their human form. The kids gasped in amazement as Hunter continued. With this newfound power, the werewolves launched a fierce counterattack against the vampires. The battle was long and bloody, with both sides suffering heavy losses. But in the end, Hunter said, his voice growing softer and more somber, the werewolves emerged victorious. Lady Crimson was slain, and her clan fled back to their castle, never to return to these woods again. The kids were silent for a moment, caught up in the excitement and danger of Hunter's story. But then Luna spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have a story too. A ghost story." Hunter chuckled. "Oh, Luna, you and your ghost stories. You know they're not real, right?" Luna nodded. "I know, but it's still fun to tell them." She took a deep breath and began her tale. "Legend has it that there was a girl who drowned in the lake near this camp many years ago. Her name was Emily, and she loved to swim. But one day," Luna's voice grew softer and more haunting, "she went out too far into the lake and got caught in the strong currents. No one was able to save her, and she drowned. The locals say," Luna continued, "that on quiet nights, when the moon is full and the lake is calm, you can hear Emily's ghostly laughter echoing across the water." The kids shivered in excitement and fear as Luna finished her story. But then Robert stood up. "I think it's time for me to head back to my cabin. Good night, everyone." Some of the kids said good night back, but a few stayed at the campfire, talking and laughing. Robert began to make his way back through the woods, the moonlight casting eerie shadows across the trees. He couldn't help but think of Hunter's story and how he had heard strange noises in the woods before. Robert quickened his pace, his heart racing as he imagined werewolves and vampires lurking behind every tree. Chapter 8. Robert walked through the dark woods, his mind racing with thoughts of Hunter's story and Luna's ghost tale. He tried to shake off the feeling of unease creeping over him, but couldn't quite manage it. His flashlight flickered, casting shadows across the trees, and he cursed under his breath. As he walked, Robert suddenly heard a twig snap behind him. He spun around, his heart racing, but saw nothing but trees and darkness. He sighed in relief, chiding himself for being so jumpy. But then, just as he turned back around, he heard another snap. This time, he was sure he wasn't alone. He shone his flashlight in the direction of the sound and caught a glimpse of movement. Robert hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest. But then, he heard a voice call out, "Hey, who's there?" Relieved to hear a human voice, Robert made his way towards the sound. As he got closer, he saw a figure emerge from the shadows. It was a boy around his own age, wearing a Camp Starlight t-shirt. "Are you lost?" the boy asked, a concerned look on his face. Robert nodded. "Yeah, I was trying to find my way back to my cabin. I got turned around." The boy smiled. "I'm Christopher. I'm from Camp Blood Moon, across the lake." Robert introduced himself, feeling a bit more at ease now that he wasn't alone in the woods. Christopher seemed friendly, with an easy smile and a relaxed demeanor. As they walked together, Christopher told Robert about his camp, how they had their own traditions and games, and how they always beat Camp Full Moon in the annual canoe race. Robert listened with interest, glad for the distraction from the eerie woods. He realized that he didn't know much about the other camps in the area, only that Full Moon was supposed to be the best. As they walked, Robert and Christopher exchanged stories and jokes, becoming fast friends. Christopher warned him to be careful near the border of their camps, saying that some of the counselors were a bit territorial. Robert nodded, understanding the need for camp rivalries, but not wanting to get caught up in any drama. He was just happy to have met someone new and friendly. As they neared Robert's cabin, Christopher slowed down. "You should be careful around the border," he said again. "Some of the counselors can get pretty territorial. I don't want you to get in trouble or anything." Robert nodded. "Thanks for the warning. I'll be careful." Christopher smiled. "No problem. And hey, if you ever want to come over to our camp and hang out, let me know. We've got a pretty great frisbee team." Robert grinned, feeling grateful for the offer. He said goodbye to Christopher and made his way back into his cabin. As he lay down in his bunk, he couldn't help but think about the strange and exciting adventures that lay ahead at Camp Full Moon. Chapter 9. The next day, Robert woke up to the sound of the other campers excitedly talking about snipe hunting. Robert had no idea what that was, but he was intrigued. As he ate breakfast, the other kids explained that snipe hunting was a camp tradition where the older campers took the new kids out into the woods at night to hunt for a mythical creature called a snipe. Robert was skeptical, but the other kids assured him it was real and that he would love it. That evening, Robert and the other new kids were blindfolded and taken out to the woods by the older campers. Robert could hear the other kids whispering and giggling, and he felt a growing sense of unease. He wasn't sure what he had gotten himself into. Suddenly, the older campers began to transform into werewolves. Robert couldn't believe his eyes as he watched them change right before him. They chased after him, howling and snarling, and Robert felt a primal fear take hold of him. Instinct kicked in and Robert's body began to change. His bones stretched and snapped, fur sprouted from his skin, and his senses heightened. He felt a surge of power and energy as he transformed into a werewolf. As he ran through the woods, Robert realized that he was faster and stronger than he had ever been before. He easily outpaced the other werewolves as they chased him through the trees. But he couldn't shake them off completely, and soon Hunter, the leader of the pack, tackled him to the ground. Robert struggled to break free, but Hunter was too strong. However, to Robert's surprise, he found himself putting up a much better fight than he had anticipated. His new werewolf strength gave him an edge he didn't know he had. Eventually, Hunter overpowered him and pinned him to the ground. As he looked up at the werewolf towering over him, Robert felt a strange connection to him. Hunter's eyes seemed to glow with recognition as he transformed back into a human. "Welcome to the pack," Hunter said, offering Robert a hand up. "You're one of us now." Robert was stunned. He had suspected something strange was going on at this camp, but he never would have guessed that everyone there was a werewolf. But as he looked around at the other campers, he could see the telltale signs of their true nature. There was a sense of kinship and belonging he had never felt before, and he knew that this was where he truly belonged. As they walked back to camp, Robert felt a sense of excitement and anticipation for what was to come. He had always felt like an outsider, but now he had found a place where he could be himself. And with his newfound werewolf powers, he knew that he could take on anything that came his way. Chapter 10. Hunter had assembled the new kids in the clearing, ready to begin their werewolf training. The girls, including Luna, had come to watch, and Hunter couldn't help but feel a little nervous. He had always had a bit of a crush on Luna, and he didn't want to embarrass himself in front of her. "All right, listen up," Hunter said, addressing the group of new kids. "Being a werewolf is all about control. You have to be able to control your emotions and your instincts." He demonstrated by transforming into his wolf form and then back into his human form. "You have to be able to do this on command. It takes practice and focus," he continued. "But with enough training, you can become a master of your werewolf powers." As Hunter spoke, Robert couldn't help but steal glances at Luna. He had always thought she was beautiful, and now that they were both werewolves, he felt like they had something in common. Hunter noticed Robert's wandering attention and decided to use it to his advantage. He intentionally made Robert look bad in front of Luna and the other girls, hoping to knock him down a peg and make himself look better in comparison. "Robert, what are you doing?" Hunter barked, interrupting the boys' distracted thoughts. "You need to focus if you want to be a good werewolf. This isn't a game." Robert felt his face flush with embarrassment as the other kids snickered. He couldn't believe Hunter had called him out like that in front of everyone, especially Luna. The class ended shortly after, and the new kids dispersed, but Hunter couldn't shake the feeling that he had been too hard on Robert. He found himself seeking the boy out later that day and offering to give him some extra training. "Look, Robert, I'm sorry about earlier," Hunter said, sheepishly. "I know you're new to all this, and I just wanted to make sure you were taking it seriously. But I shouldn't have made you look bad like that." Robert nodded, grateful for Hunter's apology. "Let's start again," Hunter said, transforming into his wolf form once more. "This time, focus on your breathing. Clear your mind and concentrate on your body. Visualize the transformation in your mind before you attempt it." Robert followed Hunter's instructions, and to his surprise, he felt himself starting to transform. He felt his muscles tense and shift, his bones cracking as he became a wolf. He felt his fur sprout and his senses sharpen. It was an incredible sensation, and he couldn't believe he was actually doing it. Hunter watched as Robert transformed, impressed with the boy's progress. "Very good, Robert," he said, smiling. "You're a natural. With a little more training, you'll be a master in no time." Over the next few days, Hunter spent extra time with Robert, teaching him everything he knew about being a werewolf. They practiced shifting, running, and fighting, and Hunter even shared some of his own personal experiences as a werewolf. As they trained, Robert found himself becoming more and more comfortable with his new powers. He felt stronger and faster than ever before, and he couldn't wait to put his skills to the test. But he couldn't shake the feeling that Hunter was interested in Luna, and it made him feel jealous. He tried to push the thought out of his mind, but he couldn't help feeling like he was competing with Hunter for her attention. Chapter 11. Robert walked back to his cabin after a refreshing shower. It was late, and most of the campers were already in bed. As he walked, he heard rustling in the bushes. He paused, listening intently. Suddenly, Christopher emerged from the bushes, looking slightly embarrassed. "Hey, Robert," Christopher said, brushing leaves off his shirt. "Sorry for scaring you." "It's okay," Robert said, smiling. "What are you doing out here?" "I just needed to get some air," Christopher said. "I couldn't sleep." Robert nodded, understanding the feeling. He often had trouble sleeping too, especially since becoming a werewolf. As they walked back to the cabin, Christopher asked, "So, are things going?" "It's going pretty well," Robert said, feeling proud of his progress. But feeling sad he was unable to tell his other new friend about being a werewolf. Christopher nodded, then hesitated before speaking again. "Hey, Robert, can I ask you something?" "Sure, what's up?" Robert said, curious. "Are you interested in Luna?" Christopher asked, looking directly at him. Robert's face turned red. Well, yeah. I mean, she's really cool and all." Christopher nodded. "Yeah, I kind of figured. But you should know that Hunter is interested in her too." Robert's heart sank. He had suspected as much, but it still hurt to hear it confirmed. "Thanks for telling me," Robert said, trying to hide the disappointment in his voice. Christopher put a hand on his shoulder. "Hey, don't worry about it too much. You're a great guy, and Luna is lucky to have your attention. Just be yourself, and things will work out." Robert smiled, grateful for Christopher's words of encouragement. "Thanks, man. I appreciate it," Robert said. Oh, and one more thing, Christopher said, looking slightly sheepish. Hunter and Luna actually dated last summer. What? Robert exclaimed, surprised. Christopher nodded. Yeah, I know. It's kind of awkward, but I thought you should know. Robert felt a pang of jealousy in his chest. He couldn't believe that Hunter had dated Luna before, and he wondered if he still had feelings for her. Thanks for telling me, Robert said, feeling a bit overwhelmed. I'll figure things out. As they reached the cabin, Christopher hesitated before speaking again. Oh, and one more thing. I know about you guys being werewolves. Robert's heart skipped a beat. What? How do you know? Christopher shrugged. I just do. I won't tell anyone, don't worry. But that's why out counselors are so protective of our camp. Robert felt a sense of relief wash over him. He had been worried that the counselors were just competitive, but it made sense now that he knew they were just worried about having werewolves for neighbors. Thanks for telling me, Robert said, feeling grateful for Christopher's honesty. Of course, man. We've got to look out for each other, Christopher said, clapping Robert on the back. Robert went to bed that night feeling a mix of emotions. He was happy to have a friend like Christopher who he could talk to about anything, but he was also worried about his feelings for Luna and how they would affect his relationship with Hunter. Chapter 12. The next morning, Robert woke up early, his mind still racing from the conversation he had with Christopher the night before. He knew he needed to talk to Hunter about what he had learned, but he wasn't sure how to broach the subject. As he dressed and headed to breakfast, he couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in his stomach. When he arrived at the dining hall, Hunter was already there, sitting with a group of other campers. Robert took a deep breath and walked over to join them. As he approached, Hunter looked up and gave him a friendly smile. Morning, Robert, Hunter said. You're up early. Robert nodded, his nerves getting the better of him. Can I talk to you for a minute? Sure, what's up? Hunter said, noticing the seriousness in Robert's tone. Robert hesitated for a moment before blurting out, Is it true that you and Luna dated last summer? Hunter's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Yeah, it is. How did you find out? Christopher told me last night, Robert said, feeling slightly embarrassed. I just wanted to know if it was true. Hunter nodded. Yeah, it's true. We dated for a few months, but it didn't work out in the end. We lived too far apart, and we decided it was better to stay friends. Robert felt a wave of relief wash over him. At least now he knew the truth. Do you still have feelings for her? Hunter shrugged. I care about her, of course, but we're just friends now. Besides, I think she likes both of us. Robert felt a twinge of jealousy at the thought of Hunter liking Luna, but he tried to push the feeling aside. What should we do? Hunter thought for a moment before speaking. I think we should just let Luna decide. We can both be friends with her, no matter what happens. Robert nodded, feeling grateful for Hunter's level-headedness. Okay, that sounds fair. But we need to be honest with each other if things start to get complicated. Hunter agreed. Absolutely. I don't want anything to come between our friendship. The rest of breakfast passed in a blur as Robert's mind raced with thoughts of Luna and his newfound feelings for her. He tried to focus on the conversation at the table, but he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something big was about to happen. After breakfast, Robert and Hunter headed back to their cabin to get ready for the day's activities. As they changed into their hiking gear, Robert couldn't help but ask, Do you think Luna will choose one of us? Hunter shrugged. I don't know. It's up to her. But no matter what, we have to respect her decision and stay friends. Robert nodded, feeling a sense of determination settle in his chest. He knew that he cared about Luna, but he also valued his friendship with Hunter. He was willing to let Luna make the final call, no matter how difficult it might be. As the boys headed out for their hike, Robert couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement mixed with apprehension. He had no idea what the day would bring, but he knew that he was ready to face it head-on. As they hiked through the woods, Robert and Hunter chatted amicably, discussing their favorite movies and music. But in the back of Robert's mind, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. Finally, as they reached the summit of a nearby hill, they saw Luna approaching from the other side. Robert's heart skipped a beat as he watched her approach, her long hair blowing in the breeze. Chapter 13. The boys meet up with Luna and started talking excitedly about the upcoming contests against Camp Blood Moon. Luna and Hunter explained that the rivalry between the two camps went back for years. It was a tradition that every summer, the two camps would compete against each other in a variety of games and activities. Robert listened intently, his excitement growing with every passing moment. He couldn't wait to show the other camp what they were made of. "It should be easy for us werewolves to win, right?" he joked. Luna laughed. "Well, we did come close to winning last year, but we lost because of the canoe race and capture the flag." Robert's expression changed from excitement to determination. "We won't let that happen again this year. We'll train hard and make sure we come out on top." Hunter nodded in agreement. "We've been practicing all summer. We're ready for this." The group discussed the various games they would be competing in. There would be traditional camp games like tug-of-war, an obstacle course, and a relay race. But the game worth the most points, and the one that would ultimately decide the winner, was the game of Capture the Flag. Luna explained the rules of the game and how it would be played. The objective is to capture the other team's flag and bring it back to your side without getting tagged by the defenders. If you get tagged, you're out, and you have to go back to your own side. Robert's mind was racing with ideas on how they could win the game. "We need a good strategy. We can't just charge in blindly. We need to plan out every move."
Luna smiled.
"That's why we're meeting up at lunch to plan out our strategy. We need to work together if we want to win." The group agreed to meet up later at lunch and went their separate ways to prepare for the contests. Robert felt a rush of excitement as he headed back to his cabin. He couldn't wait to put his plan into action and show the other camp what they were made of. As Robert walked back to his cabin, he ran into his cabin mates. He filled them in on the details of the upcoming contests and how they planned on winning the game of Capture the Flag. His cabin mates were excited, and they all agreed to meet up with the rest of the team to plan out their strategy. At lunch, the group gathered around a large table in the cafeteria. They spread out a map of the campgrounds and began to strategize. Hunter, the leader, led the discussion, throwing out ideas on how they could win the game. "We need to split up into teams and cover different areas of the campgrounds," he said. "We'll have a decoy team that will distract the other camp while the rest of us go in for the flag." Luna nodded in agreement. "That could work, but we also need to be careful. We don't want to get tagged by the defenders." Robert chimed in. "We could have some of our faster runners go in for the flag while the rest of us provide cover." The group continued to discuss and plan their strategy. They were determined to win the game of Capture the Flag and bring glory to their camp. They knew that with hard work and careful planning, they could win the game and the contests. They all headed back to their cabins to get some much-needed rest before the big event. Chapter 13. The night of the big games had finally arrived, and the Camp Full Moon team was buzzing with excitement. They had trained hard all summer, and they were ready to take on their rivals from Camp Blood Moon. Robert and his friends arrived early, eager to get started. As they made their way to the designated area, they could see the other team already waiting for them. Robert's heart raced as he saw Christopher, the team captain, standing confidently at the head of the group. Luna looked around nervously at the other team, sensing the tension in the air. "We need to stay focused," she said to her teammates. "We can do this." Hunter nodded in agreement. "We've got this. Let's show them what we're made of." The first event was tug-of-war, and Camp Full Moon emerged victorious, much to their delight. But their celebration was short-lived, as they knew the real challenge was yet to come. Next up was the obstacle course, and both teams gave it their all. It was a close race, but in the end, Camp Full Moon managed to take the lead. They now could win the whole thing early if they could win the canoe race, and not even need to play Capture the Flag. The tension was palpable as both teams made their way to the lake for the canoe race. The rules were simple. Each team had to paddle to the other side of the lake and back as quickly as possible. The team with the fastest time would win. Camp Blood Moon had to win to stay in the contest. Robert could feel his heart pounding as he got into the canoe. He was paired with Luna, and they both knew that they had to give it their all if they wanted to win. As the whistle blew, they pushed off from the shore, their paddles slicing through the water. The other team was fast, but they were determined to catch up. Christopher's team was in the lead, but Robert and Luna were gaining on them. It was neck and neck as they reached the other side of the lake and began the return journey. As they paddled back towards the shore, Robert could feel the strain in his arms and his heart pounding in his chest. They were so close, but so was the other team. They were only a few feet away from the shore when Christopher's team crossed the finish line, beating them by mere seconds. Robert felt a sinking feeling in his stomach as he realized the gravity of the situation. Now the winner would be determined by the outcome of the Capture the Flag game. As they made their way back to their cabins to prepare for the final event, Robert saw Christopher walking towards him. He took a deep breath and walked over to him. "Good luck in the Capture the Flag game," Robert said, extending his hand. Christopher shook his hand firmly. "You too," he said, a small smile on his face. Robert felt a sense of respect for his rival, even though they were competing against each other. They both knew that the game was going to be intense and that the winner would take all. The Capture the Flag game would be the ultimate test of skill and strategy, and Robert and his team were ready for it. They had a plan, and they were determined to win. But so did Christopher's team, and they were just as eager to win. Chapter 15. Realizing that his team is about to lose the game, Christopher decides to take a different approach. He lunges towards Luna, trying to grab her. However, Robert jumps in the way, and the two start fighting in human form. The fight intensifies, and Robert transforms into a werewolf for added strength. But even with his extra strength, Robert is no match for Christopher. Christopher throws Robert to the ground and grabs Luna. Without a second thought, Christopher transforms into a giant bat and flies away with Luna. Robert is left helpless, watching as Luna is carried away. As Hunter enters the scene, he sees Christopher transforming into a giant bat and flying away with Luna. Robert quickly fills Hunter in on what just happened, leaving Hunter stunned. As the rest of the camp comes in to congratulate Hunter on the win, Hunter shares the news about Luna and suggests that the others at the camp are all vampires. Robert is worried about Luna's safety and says they can't waste any time. They need to act now. Hunter, on the other hand, suggests that they take a moment to plan out their next move instead of blindly going after the vampires. Robert becomes angry and frustrated, insisting that they need to act fast and not wait. Hunter understands Robert's concern for Luna's safety, but he knows that a reckless attack could put everyone at risk. The debate becomes heated, with Hunter trying to reason with Robert while the rest of the camp watches on in surprise. Hunter reminds Robert that he is leader of the pack, and while Hunter has grown a lot, he is still not a leader. In the end, Robert decides to take matters into his own hands and go after Luna himself, despite Hunter's warnings. As Robert runs out into the woods, Hunter looks on with steely determination, knowing that he needs to catch up to Robert and make sure that they don't make a reckless mistake that could cost them all dearly. The camp is left in silence, realizing the gravity of the situation, as Hunter takes off into the woods after Robert. Chapter 16. Hunter chased after Robert into the woods, determined to catch up with him before he could do anything reckless that would put Luna in danger. After a few minutes of running, Hunter finally caught up with Robert and called out to him, telling him to stop and listen to reason. Robert turned around, his eyes filled with anger and worry. "I can't just stand here and wait while Luna is in danger," he said. "I have to do something. I have to save her." Hunter nodded, understanding Robert's concern. "I know, but going alone won't help Luna. You'll just get caught, and then what?" Robert frowned, not wanting to admit that Hunter was right. "I don't know. I just have to try something. I can't just sit here and wait for morning." Hunter placed a hand on Robert's shoulder. "I understand how you feel, but we need to be smart about this. We need a plan. And we need to wait until morning when the vampires are asleep. That's when we'll have the best chance of rescuing Luna." Robert sighed, knowing that Hunter was right. He hated the idea of waiting, but he knew that Hunter was the more experienced of the two, and he trusted his judgment. "Fine, but what about Christopher? How did we not realize he was a vampire all this time?" Hunter shook his head. "Just because he's never around during the day doesn't mean he's a vampire. We're all busy with camp things during the day, so it's not unusual for us to only see each other at night." Robert looked down, feeling foolish. "I should have realized something was off about him. I just didn't want to believe it." Hunter patted Robert's shoulder reassuringly. "It's not your fault. We were all caught off guard. But now we know, and we can make a plan to deal with it." Robert nodded, feeling a little better. "So what's the plan?" Hunter took a deep breath, thinking for a moment. "We wait until morning, when the vampires are asleep. Then, We sneak into their camp and try to find Luna. Once we have her, we'll make a run for it." Robert frowned. "That sounds risky. What if we get caught?" Hunter shrugged. "We'll have to take that chance. But we can't just sit around and wait for something to happen. We have to take action." Robert nodded, feeling a little more confident now that they had a plan. "Okay, let's do it." Hunter smiled, feeling relieved that Robert was on board. "Good. But there's one more thing we need to talk about." "What's that?" Hunter looked around, making sure no one was listening. "I've always been a little suspicious of the camp contest. Why is it always at night? And how could they physically compete against a bunch of werewolves?" Robert raised an eyebrow. "What are you getting at?" Hunter leaned in closer. "I think the camp contest is just a cover-up. I think the vampires have been using it to spy on us and gather information." Robert looked surprised. "You really think so?" Hunter nodded. "It's the only thing that makes sense. And I think we need to be careful. They might know more about us than we think." Robert nodded, feeling a little uneasy. "Okay, we'll keep that in mind. But for now, let's focus on rescuing Luna." Chapter 17. Robert and Hunter waited until the sun was high in the sky before making their way to the vampires' camp. The daylight would keep the vampires inside and make it safer for them to sneak around undetected. As they approached the camp, they were struck by the sight of a large brick castle in the center. It was an imposing structure, with high walls and a moat surrounding it. Robert and Hunter could only imagine what kind of horrors lay within. They took a deep breath and snuck into the castle, moving as quietly as possible. As they crept through the halls, they heard the sound of voices up ahead. They cautiously peeked around a corner and saw a group of vampires huddled together, discussing something in hushed tones. Robert and Hunter quickly ducked back behind the corner, trying to figure out what to do. They knew they couldn't take on a group of vampires alone. As they were considering their options, they noticed a piece of paper lying on the ground. It was crumpled and dirty, as if someone had dropped it and never bothered to pick it up. Curiosity getting the better of them, Robert and Hunter picked up the paper and unfolded it. What they saw made their blood run cold. It was a detailed plan of attack on the werewolf camp. The vampires had been gathering information about the werewolves for weeks, and they were planning to strike during the new moon when the werewolves were weakest. Robert and Hunter exchanged a look of horror. They knew they had to do something to stop the attack. They continued to sneak through the castle, searching for any sign of Luna. It took them several more minutes of wandering before they finally stumbled upon a dark, damp cell in the basement. Inside, they found Luna, her hands tied behind her back and a cloth gag stuffed in her mouth. She looked up as they entered, relief flooding her face. Robert quickly untied Luna's hands, and Hunter removed the gag from her mouth. Luna hugged them both tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "I thought I was going to die in here." Robert and Hunter nodded, knowing they had to get out of the castle quickly before they were discovered. They led Luna out of the cell and began to make their way back through the castle. As they were leaving, they stumbled upon another piece of paper lying on the ground. This one was different, though. It was a list of names, along with a note that read, "To be turned." Robert and Hunter's hearts sank as they realized the implications of the list. The vampires were planning to turn some of the werewolves in their camp into hybrid vampires. They knew they had to get out of there and warn the others before it was too late. Chapter 18. Hunter, Luna, and Robert dashed through the castle, their hearts racing with fear. They had made too much noise, and the vampires had woken up. Now they were being chased through the halls by a group of angry, bloodthirsty vampires. They could hear the pounding of footsteps behind them and the snarling of the vampires' teeth as they closed in. Hunter took the lead, fighting any vampire that got too close. Luna and Robert ran as fast as they could, trying to keep up with Hunter. They could see the daylight streaming in from the windows ahead, and they knew that once they were outside, the vampires wouldn't be able to chase them. They ran past Hunter as he stayed back to fight. Hunter yelled at them to keep going and that he would get out after they did. As they burst out into the bright sunlight, they felt a surge of relief. But just as they were about to cross the drawbridge, they heard a shout from behind them. Turning around, they saw Hunter surrounded by a swarm of vampires. He was fighting bravely, but there were too many of them. "Hunter!" Luna screamed, but he didn't seem to hear her. Robert grabbed Luna's hand and pulled her along, urging her to run. They raced across the drawbridge and into the safety of the daylight. Breathless and heartbroken, they turned back to watch as Hunter valiantly fought off the vampires. His fought, but it was clear that he was outnumbered. As Luna and Robert watched in horror, they saw Hunter fall to the ground, overcome by the swarm of vampires. They stood frozen, watching as the vampires descended upon him. In the background, Robert saw Christopher watch as Hunter the grisly scene unfolded. Finally, unable to bear the sight any longer, Luna turned away and buried her face in Robert's shoulder, tears streaming down her face. Robert held her tightly, his own eyes wet with tears. Together, they mourned the loss of their friend and companion, knowing that he had given his life to save theirs. They knew that they would never forget his sacrifice, and that they would honor his memory by fighting to protect the rest of their pack from the vampire threat. Today, Robert had lost 2 friends. Chapter 19. Luna and Robert trudged back to camp, the weight of Hunter's death heavy on their shoulders. Robert tried to talk to Luna about what had just happened, but she was unresponsive. She didn't want to talk about it, and the silence between them grew more uncomfortable with each passing moment. As they entered the camp, the rest of the pack looked up, noticing the solemn expressions on their faces. Luna and Robert walked over to the center of the camp, where the pack leaders were gathered. Luna took a deep breath and began to recount what had happened in the castle and how Hunter had sacrificed himself to save them. The campers listened intently, their faces grim. They knew that Hunter had been a strong and capable leader, and his loss was a blow to the pack. After Luna finished speaking, there was a moment of silence as everyone mourned his passing. Then, one of the campers spoke up. "We need to choose a new leader, and we need to do it quickly. We can't afford to be without a leader for long." Robert nodded in agreement. "But how do we choose a new leader?" he asked. "There will be a series of tests," another camper replied. "Tests of strength, speed, agility, leadership, and wisdom. Everyone will get a chance to prove themselves. Each test will eliminate contenders until the last 2 left will fight for the position." Robert looked around at the other members of the pack, wondering who would step up to take Hunter's place. He knew that the test would be tough, and that not everyone would make it through. But he also knew that they needed a strong leader to guide them through the dangerous times ahead. As the day wore on, the pack began to prepare for the tests. Some members were sharpening their claws, while others were practicing their fighting skills. Robert and Luna watched from the sidelines, feeling like outsiders in their own pack. Robert tried to talk to Luna again, but she still didn't want to talk about what had happened. He could tell that she was shutting him out, and it made him feel even more alone. Finally, as the sun began to set, the camp counselors gathered everyone together for the tests. Robert watched as they explained the rules and regulations, and his heart sank as he realized just how challenging the test would be. But despite his nerves, Robert was determined to do his best. He knew that he had to prove himself if he wanted to be a contender for the leadership position. Robert braced himself for the grueling tests that lay ahead. He knew that he had to stay focused and determined, no matter what challenges came his way. And he hoped that, in the end, he would be able to honor Hunter's memory by becoming the pack's new leader. Chapter 20. The sun had set, and the moon was shining bright in the sky. The pack was gathered around the first challenge, a large obstacle course that was set up near the edge of the woods. The counselors had explained the rules to everyone. They had an hour to make it through the course, and if they failed, they were out of the contest. Everyone who finished would move on. Robert looked around at the other contestants, sizing up his competition. He knew that he had to do well in this challenge if he wanted to stay in the running for the leadership position. Luna was standing a few feet away from him, her eyes fixed on the course. She looked determined, and Robert felt a surge of admiration for her. Even though she had been through so much, she still had the strength to keep going. The counselors blew a whistle, signaling the start of the challenge. The contestants surged forward, each one eager to prove themselves. Robert ran as fast as he could, leaping over hurdles and ducking under obstacles. He could feel the wind rushing past him, and his heart was pounding in his chest. As he approached the final stretch of the course, Robert could see that he was one of the first to reach the finish line. He let out a whoop of excitement as he crossed the line, feeling a surge of pride in his accomplishment. Luna wasn't far behind him, and she also made it through the course with flying colors. Robert watched as she finished the course, impressed by her grace and agility. He felt a twinge of regret that they were on separate teams for the next challenge, but he knew that it was all part of the contest. The counselors announced the results of the first challenge. Many contestants had failed to make it through the course, and they were immediately eliminated from the contest. The rest of the contestants moved on to the next challenge, a test of wisdom. The remaining players were divided up evenly into teams, and Robert found himself on a team with 3 other contestants. Luna was on a team on another team. The counselors led the teams to a small cabin in the woods, where they explained the rules for the challenge. Each team had a series of puzzles to solve, and they had an hour to solve them and escape the cabin. If they failed, they would be eliminated from the contest. Robert and his team got to work, examining the puzzles and trying to find a solution. They worked quickly, their minds racing as they tried to figure out the answers. It was slow going, but eventually they were able to figure it out and made it out at the last second. Meanwhile, Luna's team seemed to be making quick work of the puzzles. Robert watched as they solved puzzle after puzzle, feeling a surge of frustration. He couldn't believe that Luna was doing so well, even without his help. Robert watched as Luna's team emerged from the cabin with a much better time, feeling a surge of admiration. All the other teams failed to get out in time. Robert knew he had to do better in the next challenge if he wanted to stay in the running for the leadership position. Can't wait to hear the end. Dive into the heart-stopping adventure of Beware. Camp Full Moon by Where on Amazon today. Or wait for the conclusion on YouTube coming soon, but maybe not soon enough.